Sorry about that, guys. It's the Friday the 13th mask because, as many of you know, Jason doesn't talk, right? So, when you put this sucker on, I mean, I can hear myself, but clearly you guys can't hear me. Okay, that was bad. I admit that was bad. Hey, look, I actually have hair. Yes, I do. I bet a lot of you guys out there thought I did, I was bald under those hats, right? No, I'm not bald. I just like wearing hats. And right now I got some major bedhead. So I'm going to put my hat back on. And yeah, I'm kind of a hat guy. You know what I mean? I mean, I certainly wouldn't wear a hat to like a function or a wedding or something like that. But out and about, I'm just kind of a hat guy. So anyways, yes, as you can see, we're talking about Friday the 13th today. Yes. So I thought I would bust out my Friday the 13th Part 3 Jason mask. Now, he usually sits right up over there between Darth Vader and Yoda. Actually, I haven't had this guy that long. I purchased him a few weeks ago over Labor Day weekend at Fan Expo here in Toronto. Now, Fan Expo is a Comic-Con. It's the largest of its kind in Canada, and actually it's one of the largest of its kind in North America. Over the 4 days, usually at the end of August, beginning of September is when it happens. It's not unprecedented for the Fan Expo to get like 130, 140,000 people rolling through the Metro Toronto Convention Center, downtown Toronto. So anyway, so I went with my girlfriend and we had a really good time. And I went over to this vendor who had all these Jason masks lined up, or Hawks as they call them, right? You guys who are huge fans of Jason probably know that, they call these the Hawks. What Hawk do you have? Yeah, I got that Hawk. You got that Hawk? Yeah, I got that Hawk. It's like, oh wow, holy fucking shit. Anyway, so they had all the Jason masks from all the movies. And I settled on this guy because whenever I think of Jason, okay, when I close my eyes and I think of Jason from Friday the 13th, this is what comes to mind, okay? Because I am a huge fan of Friday the 13th, 1 through 4. I mean, that's pretty much it to me. As you guys know, I'm a huge Halloween fan as well. And Halloween to me, as you guys know, is Halloween 1 and 2, 1978, 1981, and that's it. That's kind of where it ends. That doesn't mean there aren't some redeeming qualities in subsequent sequels like Halloween 4, which, there's some things in there that are all right. But to me, 1 and 2, that's the end of it. You know what I'm saying? For me, Friday the 13th is 1, 2, 3, 4, the final chapter. That's the end of it. You know what I'm saying? Again, that doesn't mean there aren't some redeeming qualities in the later sequels. I actually didn't mind Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. But then you get 7, The New Blood, and then 8, he's taking Manhattan, and then 9's a fucking shit show, and 10, he's in space. I mean, it's just kind of like, and that doesn't, hey, if you guys are fans of those films, that's awesome, that's great, but it gets so far away from what I like about a horror movie, what I like about a slasher movie, that I just don't give a shit. It's just, So to me, when I close my eyes, I see Jason from Part 3 and Part 4. So that's why I picked up this mask. Really awesome stuff. So anyway, let me put this sucker over here so he, doesn't get ruined or anything like that. So how you guys doing? We're talking about Friday the 13th today. So where do I want to start? Well, I want to start here. My favorite as you guys know, 1, 2, 3, 4. Friday the 13th 1, Friday the 13th 2, Friday the 13th 3, or 3D for those of you hardcore fans, and Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. That, to me, is the Friday the 13th series. My favorite Friday the 13th film is Part 1, actually. Funny enough, the film that Jason is not in. Now, okay, don't get technical. I know that Jason does appear at the end of the movie when he comes out of the lake, but you know what I mean. He's not the main antagonist, right? He's not the killer. As you know, spoiler alert if you don't, the killer is Jason's mom, Pamela Voorhees. So, I really liked Friday the 13th Part 1 a lot because it's almost like this balance between slasher horror, which it is. I mean, there's blood and gore in it, of course. It's a typical 80s slasher movie with blood, guts, and gore. But there's this psychological component to it. Not hugely. I mean, it's not like we're talking about Seven or even The Others, or something like that. No, but there's this slight psychological component to it that I really liked about the first Friday the 13th. And for all intents and purposes, guys, there's something a little scarier to me about a 60-year-old woman running around the forest at night going, help me, mommy, help me. I mean, what the fuck is that? This 60-year-old woman running around the forest at night during a storm? Like, there's something a little creepier. There's something a little fucked up about that, and a lot scarier than Jason, so to speak. But let me explain. So, not that I don't love Jason. I love Jason. We all love Jason, right? But you know what I mean. So, I love the slight psychological component to the original Friday the 13th. And I'll give you some examples. There's a great scene in the original where, I forget her name now, but one of the camp counselors, she goes back to her cabin after playing strip poker, I think it was, that we were playing, right? They're like, oh, we'll have to reconvene a bit later. Because the storm has come in and the wind's blown the door open, and she figures, all right, that's probably a good time to sort of call it quits for now. We'll pick up this tomorrow or whatever. So she goes back to her cabin to get ready for bed. And she gets into bed, and there's the storm, right? The rain is teeming down. There's thunder. There's lightning. And she gets into bed. The classic Friday the 13th music from the originals is playing, right? You know what I mean? But it's not too loud. It's very understated. It's just sort of there, that little subtlety to create, a bit of that mood. Every now and then you get a slight which we'll talk about later, but very subtle, very well done, very well executed, and very well implemented during this scene. And she gets into bed, and we cut outside. It's not a POV shot, but we just cut outside. The camera is now outside looking through the window at her in bed, and she's reading. And you hear in the storm, in the rain, you hear very subtly underneath the rain and the thunder and the lightning, you hear, "Help me! Help me!" What the fuck is that? Can you imagine you're alone with only like 5 other people at this campground in the middle of fucking nowhere? There's a huge storm with rain teeming down and thunder and lightning, and you've gone to bed. Maybe it's like, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the morning or something, and you're lying in bed and and you're there help me, help me. And it sounds like a little kid. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? I love that the character of Pamela Voorhees taunts the counselors. She's busting their balls, so to speak, right? Do you know what I mean? She's playing with them. I really like that component. And it's nothing huge. It's not over the top. It's just really creepy and really, really weird, right? And the camp counselor is there, and she's like, and that classic little subtle Friday the 13th music is there. You know what I'm saying? She's there. She's like, oh, maybe I didn't hear it. You know what I'm saying? And she goes back to reading her book, and then, help me! Kind of gets a little more distressed, right? And she's like, what the hell? I am hearing this. And she gets up and she puts her book down and she puts her rain poncho on, or whatever it is, a coat or a poncho, whatever. And she goes out into the rain. Now, the thing I love about the way they executed this, and there's a number of reasons why they may have done it this way. Primarily, it could have been for budgetary reasons. But most modern day films, not just horror, but most modern day films, when they're shooting at night, it's very, very well lit. And they justify that. The white light sort of illuminating the scene is justified for, it's the moonlight, or it's a couple of street lights, or it's just that ambient sort of nighttime light that you get from surrounding houses and cars and buildings and whatever the case is, right? But you can see pretty well, okay? During Friday the 13th, the original Friday the 13th, when those counselors are running through the rain from cabin to cabin, or from, point A to point B, you hardly see them. Yes, you see them with maybe their yellow raincoats, and you can kind of see them. But generally speaking, all you see, at least in the original VHS, in the original DVD, I mean, maybe, if you were to watch it on Blu-ray, they've really hamped up those scenes. I'm not too sure. I haven't watched the original Friday the 13th on Blu-ray, so maybe they've lightened those scenes up a bit. I don't know. But watching those scenes on VHS, or watching those scenes on DVD, and I'm sure watching it in the theater, you only see the illumination of the flashlight beams. Like, that's all you see. It's just, the beams going up and down. And you kind of see a bit of their raincoats, and they're going, it's so dark. It gives this claustrophobic sort of feel from going to point A to point B. You don't see where they're going. And the rain is teeming down and the thunder is there. It feels like, like you're really there. You know what I mean? Because that's what it would be like. I mean, if you're in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, okay, where there's not really any electricity, okay, and they're using, you know, candles and torches and lamps and gas lit, you know, all this stuff, right? That's what it would be like. And there's a storm, so there's no moon, okay? So there's no like this ambient light coming from the moon. It's a massive storm, and it's a pretty big storm, which lasts pretty much all night, right? Or at least up to the point when Jason's mom gets her head cut off on the beach. So I love that component to it. There's this slight psychological sort of component to it in the mix of this slasher film. Another great example of this is when one of the camp counselors, not the same one, the one who's dating Kevin Bacon, I forget her name now too, but she's in the bathroom, right? And she's sort of getting ready to, you know, go and have sex with Kevin Bacon. I think it's during this scene. Anyway, so she's in the bathroom and she's, you know, looking at herself. And, oh, yes, I look very nice. Oh, yes. You know, whatever the case is, right? And she looks to her left. And there's this great shot because there's this little hallway. And down at the end of the hallway are where all the stalls are, right? And the stalls don't have any doors on them. So it's just a curtain. Maybe it's her. Actually, you know what? I stand to be corrected. It might be one of the other counselors. Now, I know the counselor in question that I'm talking about. She's the one that eventually gets killed down there, okay, with the axe to the head. But now that I think about it, maybe it is the other counselor who has this experience. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't watched the movie in a couple of years. So comment below and let me know if I'm wrong on this. But anyway, one of the female counselors looks down. It's this great shot. It's moody, right? Because the only thing that's illuminating the stalls down there are those like hanging lights, you know. You know what I'm saying, right? And it's just kind of hanging there. And there's this creepy shot of just this stall. And you don't even notice this at first, okay? You tend not to notice it. I mean, you do now because you know what to look for. But I can imagine watching this film for the very first time, you wouldn't notice this right away until it's removed. And what I mean is that there's this shot of the stall down the hallway with the light there illuminating the curtain that's drawn over the doorway of the stall. So the curtain's like this, right? And there's just this hand here, like this. You can actually see this hand here. And all the hand does is just go like this. It just moves. As if there's somebody on the other side of the curtain kind of going like this, right? But all you see is the hand. And the hand just kind of moves like this, which causes the curtain to subtly move like this. And that's what catches your attention as a viewer, because it's almost too far away to notice that the hand is sort of there. But then you kind of know, oh, fuck, there's a hand there. And it moved away and the curtain kind of moves. And that catches the attention of the counselor. That kind of shit is great. It's great stuff. It's scary. It's eerie. It's psychological. It gets in your head. What the fuck is that? Who's down there? Is that somebody? Am I imagining this? Am I imagining, help me? Like, what is this shit, right? I loved that component to the original Friday the 13th and how Pamela Voorhees sort of plays with the counselors. She's fucking with them, you know, because she's like, you know what? If I'm going to kill your fucking asses, I'm going to fuck with you guys, okay? Whereas when you talk about Jason, Jason was more methodical, right? Jason was more A, B, C, D, kill. A, B, C, D, kill. A, B, C, D, kill. That doesn't mean that he didn't hide in certain spots or you didn't walk into a cabin and he'd be kind of in the corner, maybe his mask showing a bit, maybe kind of like Michael Myers, right? It doesn't mean that there weren't those things from time to time. But having said that, by and large, Jason was more of a jump scare kind of person, right? Da-da-da, you know, and he would come through. And that's not to say that that didn't happen in the original as well. I'm just saying that Jason wasn't out in the rain going, hey guys, come here. I mean, he wasn't doing that kind of shit. You know what I'm saying? We have this 60-year-old grandma running around the forest at night with a knife, you know, help me. I mean, that's fucking scary as far as I'm concerned. And no, maybe even a little more scarier than Jason. So, I just really loved that component to the original Friday the 13th. If you haven't watched the original Friday the 13th in quite some time, because you tend to be more a Jason lover, right? You like to watch the movies that he's in, which is fair because he's so iconic to the franchise. He is Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th is Jason. But that original film is so good. with mood and atmosphere and pacing and tension and, slight psychological components to it, that it's my favorite out of the series. It's also where the or should I say, because that's what it originally was. For those of you who don't know, now hardcore fans of Friday the 13th will know what I'm about to say, but maybe some of you don't. It actually is ma, K-I-K-I-K-I-K-I-M-A-M-A-M-A-M-A. And that actually comes from the guy who was in charge of sort of making this signature sound. It might have been the same guy that did all of the music, actually. I'm not entirely sure. Comment below and let me know, because I don't have it in front of me. But anyway, the guy who came up with this took a microphone and harshly and firmly right into the microphone went, and it's supposed to be, the K-I comes from kill, and the M-A comes from ma, as in, kill her, mommy, kill her, right? Which is what Pamela Voorhees says at the very end of the movie. Sort of channeling her son, that her son wants her to kill all of the camp counselors, right? Because of course he died because camp counselors weren't paying attention, right? Okay, cool. But when they took that and they put it through a reverberation machine, it came out sounding like ch-ch-ch. So everybody, thinks it's ch-ch-ch, which works. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to anything about the film, but it still works as a creepy, eerie sort of sound that plays whenever the killer is close or the killer is around or whatever the case is, right? And for me, in the later sequels, like really late, okay, not 2, 3, or 4, but when you're talking like, 6 and 7 and certainly like 8 and 9 and stuff, it wasn't as scary to me. There's some movies, I forget which sequel it was. It might have been 5, it might have even been 6, could have been 7, I can't remember, but as the sequels went on, there were certain moments where it was like, and it's like, what is this? What is this? No, go back to the roots. It was an eerie, creepy kind of sound. It may not have sounded like as it was supposed to be, but it worked nonetheless. And I think that very first Friday the 13th, watch the very beginning of the movie when it's the 1950s, right? And they're showing sort of those 2 camp counselors that were killed by Jason's mom at the very beginning of the movie, right? And then, it cuts and her face goes like this and it goes all white and the Friday the 13th comes to the screen. You know the scene I'm talking about, right? The very beginning of the movie, it's all POV shot, right? When the camera goes into the cabin and we see all the, the kids asleep and you kind of hear, I don't know if it's a banjo or a guitar or whatever they're playing, right? Way off in the background, the singing, and Pamela Voorhees is in the cabin. The is awesome during that scene because it's the first time we're hearing it. It's the original. You know what I mean? It's like those who love Carpenter's rendition of the Halloween theme. It still sounds like the Halloween theme in later sequels, but there's something just special about that first one. Do you know what I mean? And another thing that is really overlooked about the first 4 Friday the 13th movies is not just the but that great Friday the 13th music, that great Friday the 13th score. You know the music I'm talking about. Da-dun, da-da-da-da-da-dun, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dun. You know what I'm talking about, right? Totally awesome. I mean, it's not as good as the Halloween theme, and it's probably not quite as good as the Elm Street stuff, but it's creepy stuff, and it feels like horror music. It feels like dark, eerie, moody sort of certain elements within that theme. If you listen to the whole thing, it's just great stuff, man. Oh, totally awesome stuff. It doesn't get the credit I think it deserves, personally, because usually when people think of Elm Street, they compliment the music a lot. When they think of Halloween, of course, Halloween wouldn't be Halloween without its music. But Friday the 13th, not just the but the musical score that encompasses that whole movie and pretty much part 1 through 4, it's great shit. It's great stuff. I really, really like it. When we move on to Friday the 13th Part 2, I like Friday the 13th Part 2. I do. And the idea of bringing Jason back, I thought was smart. I thought that was kind of cool. And I thought, okay, if you're going to continue the series, that's one way you could do it. You totally could have negated the Jason Voorhees, Pamela Voorhees story because it's pretty much done. She got her her head chopped off on the beach, and Jason died in the lake years earlier. So you could have continued on, but maybe sort of made it like an anthology series, right? Where there's different creepy, weird, fucked up stories that happen on Friday the 13th. You could have done that. And this was before Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, so it's not like the Friday the 13th franchise had anything to compare it to and be like, oh shit, no, look what happened with Halloween. We ain't doing that. No, part 2 of Friday the 13th came out before Halloween 3, so I think they could have done that. But hey, you know what? You bring Jason back. Okay, I don't believe Sean S. Cunningham was too keen on it, which is why he wasn't heavily involved in the sequel, and certainly why he didn't direct it. Steve Miner did. But that being said, I think it's a decent sequel. And I think if you're going to have fun and make this slasher movie about okay, it was all right. And of course, he wore the potato sack in that movie with the one eye, which I thought was really creepy. I thought it was well done. And what I liked about Jason too, I didn't like that Jason became sort of, in the later sequels, he became kind of this Frankenstein sort of monster, right? The Wolfman, Swamp Thing, creature from the Black Lagoon. I mean, whatever the case is, he became like those 1940s 50s Universal type monsters. Certainly when you got to part like 6, 7, 8, 9, he's like this hulking, and Kane Hodder is huge, right? So he's like this, and certainly he was way big, he was much bigger then too. So he's like this big hulk, and it's like, okay, some people, that's Jason to you. That's Jason. That's Jason. To me, I like Jason from part 2 and part 3 and part 4. Now, he was quite bigger in part 3 and 4 than he was in part 2. But he just seemed kind of like a tall guy, with a bit of mass on him, but he wasn't like this hulking beast of a man with his ribs showing, and he became literally supernatural. Like he became like the Wolfman or creature from the Black Lagoon or, whatever the case is. And maybe that's your Jason, but that's not my Jason. So with Friday the 13th part 2, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that angle of it. I really thought it was, kind of neat to bring him back, but okay, where is this going to go? And I thought that by part 3, they sort of have found their identity. Okay, this is going to be a series about this Jason guy who, for whatever reason, can't be killed, and he comes back to haunt the camp counselors at Camp Crystal Lake. But when Friday the 13th part 4 came along, and it was called The Final Chapter, I thought that should have been it. I thought that was sort of a nice wrap-up. You kind of have this set, but they killed him at the end of 4. So we thought, right? And then part 5 was sort of Friday the 13th's Halloween 3. And even though part 5 did have Jason in it, so to speak, it was really Roy, right? I think his name was Roy, right? The ambulance guy. Anyway, it still wasn't Jason, right? It was this guy who sort of donned the mask to continue the tradition because, of what happened to his fucking son. And he was a little himself. So, but people wanted Jason. They wanted Jason. And I can understand that. I mean, you do 3 movies with Jason. You have Jason coming out of the lake at the end of the first movie. Yeah, you've set it up as a Jason series, very much like what you did with Halloween, right? You set it up as a Michael Myers series, which is why I don't think they should have gone on. It doesn't mean there aren't redeeming qualities that I enjoy about the later sequels of Friday the 13th, but to me, Friday the 13th is 1 through 4. I don't enjoy 2, 3, and 4 as much as I enjoy the original, but there are a lot of things about 2, 3, and 4 that I do enjoy. I thought part 3 out of the 4 was the most campy a little bit. You kind of had, that biker gang, and it was kind of like, okay, what is it? You know what I mean? But that being said, 3 certainly is the movie that, that's the movie where he gets his hockey mask, right? That's it. I mean, that's the movie where he dons this. He steals it from Shelley. We know that. Part 3 will always hold a special place in Friday the 13th fans' hearts because not only is it sort of a fun kind of movie to watch with some humor in there, it's where he dons his mask. So when you first see him wearing that mask, and I believe the first time we see him wearing it is when he steps out onto the dock, right? He steps out onto the dock and it's just like, who's that? And he comes kind of under the light and it's like, oh, fuck. You know what I mean? That will always hold a special place in Friday the 13th fans' hearts. And I completely understand that. But for me, the series is 1, 2, 3, 4, with 1 being my favorite. In regards to remaking Friday the 13th, like I said in my Elm Street video, look, there's no doubt they're going to do it again. They attempted to do it under Platinum Dunes in 2009, the year before they released the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street. And there's no doubt that they're going to do it again. I know they were sort of on track very recently, but then they fell off track and there's a whole bunch of corporate bullshit involved and legalities and just creative bullshit. And there's just a ton of reasons why there has not been a proper remake of Friday the 13th, certainly since 2009. And I agree with those that say it's not fucking rocket science. I mean, it's camp counselors at a camp being stalked by somebody in the woods. I mean, come on, let's get this fucking thing together. You know what I'm saying? But for me, if they're going to remake Friday the 13th, and they will eventually do it again. I know some things are sort of up in the air right now, and it might not be for quite a while, but somewhere down the road, they more than likely will remake it again. Look, first of all, I don't want them to remake it at all. I think it's completely unnecessary. I personally don't even think enough time has gone by. I think maybe remake it another 25 years if you're going to do it. But you know what? I don't even think it needs to be remade. Think of something new. Think of something different. But that being said, if they're going to do it, go back to the roots. Go back to the original Friday the 13th. I don't want to see Jason as the killer. Create a psychological horror slasher movie. Have a mature tone to it. You know what I mean? Like in my Elm Street video, I said that I want to see an Elm Street remake with the maturity of like a 7. I don't mean it's as sophisticated necessarily like a 7, but the overall tonality of the film is very serious and dark. And that's what I want coming into this Friday the 13th movie. It's not hokey or campy. It's not a reflection of the times like Halloween H2O was in the mid-90s. It was like Michael Myers walked onto the set of Dawson's Creek. You know what I'm saying? No. Let's make this serious, grounded, mature, fucking scary psychological slasher film called Friday the 13th about this fucking crazy 60-year-old grandma in the fucking woods hunting camp counselors. That's fucking scary, man. Okay, that's scary. And that's what I want to see. But when are they going to remake the Friday the 13th movie? Will they do it how I would like them to do it? I'm not holding my breath. Anyways, folks, my name's Dave McRae. Comment below and let me know your thoughts about what I had to say. What is your favorite Friday the 13th movie? Do you like the original, or are you more of a Jason person? And you tend to watch the original the least because, well, it doesn't really have Jason in it. And I really like my Jason. I want to see Jason. Yeah, Jason. Maybe that's your Friday the 13th. Or do you sort of really like Friday the 13th Part 1 as well for the same reasons that I said? Maybe you like it because it doesn't have Jason in it. Not because you hate Jason, but because you really value sort of that first installment and what they brought to the table in that film. Comment below and let me know your thoughts, folks. My name's Dave McRae, and this to me, this is my Jason. Part 3 and Part 4. This is my Jason. Okay, and Part 2 as well. I think that's kind of cool. But anyways, comment below and let me know your thoughts. I want to hear it all. Help me! Help me!